The transport shuttle hummed through the atmosphere of Threshold Prime, carrying 23 students toward their final exam. Dae-sung sat near the window watching the wilderness below. Endless forests stretched in every direction, broken only by rivers and rocky hills. He said nothing, just watched and thought. 7 days alone, Hyunwoo said from across the aisle. His scales gleamed under the shuttle lights, green and proud. My people have survived in worse conditions for months. This will be easy. The avian student named Erin fluffed her feathers. Easy for those who can fly, she said with a musical laugh. I will build my shelter high in the trees where it is safe and comfortable. Dae-sung listened but did not join the conversation. He had learned during his 2 years at the Galactic Survival Academy that talking and doing were different things. The other students liked to talk. He preferred to watch and learn. Instructor Velthar stood at the front of the shuttle. The crystalline teacher's body caught the light and scattered it in rainbow patterns across the walls. Velthar had taught survival skills for 200 cycles, longer than any human had been alive. When Velthar spoke, students listened. Your assignment is simple, Velthar said. The instructor's voice sounded like wind chimes, clear and precise. You will be dropped at separate locations before sunset. You must survive for 7 planetary rotations. Each of you will receive 3 basic tools: a cutting implement, rope, and a fire-starting kit. You must build adequate shelter. You must find food and water. You must survive. A student near the back raised a tentacle. What are the grading criteria? Shelter quality, Velthar answered. Resource management. Survival efficiency. We will monitor you remotely, but we will not intervene unless your life is in immediate danger. This is your final test. Pass and you graduate. Fail and you repeat the year. Dae-sung felt the shuttle begin to descend. He pressed his hand against the window, studying the terrain below. He could see a river winding through the forest. That was good. Water meant life. Water meant clay, fish, and plants. He made mental notes of everything he saw. Nervous human? Hyunwoo asked. The reptilian student's eyes glittered with competitive amusement. I heard your species needs much sleep and soft beds. 7 days on hard ground will be difficult for you. I will manage, Dae-sung said quietly. Erin laughed again. Humans are so fragile. No wings, no scales, no natural weapons. I wonder how your species survived long enough to reach the stars. Dae-sung did not answer. He had heard similar comments many times. Let them think what they wanted. Words did not matter. Results mattered. The shuttle landed at the first drop point. A small insectoid student named Boknam gathered her supplies and stepped out. The door closed and the shuttle lifted again. One by one, students were deposited across the wilderness, each several kilometers from the others. Finally, only Dae-sung remained. Your location is ahead, Velthar said, approaching him. The instructor studied him with multifaceted eyes that saw in spectrums humans could not perceive. Dae-sung, you have been a quiet student. Your written work is excellent, but you rarely speak in class. I am curious to see how you perform in practical application. I will do my best, instructor. I am sure you will. Velthar's tone was kind but neutral. Remember, this is about survival, not competition. Build adequate shelter, stay safe. We will retrieve you in 7 days. The shuttle descended to Dae-sung's drop point. He gathered his supplies, a sharp metal blade the length of his forearm, 20 meters of strong rope, and a fire starter that would produce sparks. Simple tools, but enough. The door opened. Evening air rushed in, cool and smelling of pine and earth. Dae-sung stepped out onto a grassy clearing near a stream. The shuttle lifted immediately, its engines fading into the distance. Then silence. Dae-sung stood still for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the fading light. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple. Most students would make a simple fire, eat their emergency rations, and sleep. They would begin building tomorrow morning, rested and ready. Dae-sung set down his supplies and began to walk the perimeter of the clearing. He counted his steps, noting distances. The stream was 15 meters to the east, flowing south to north. Good water flow, which meant it was probably fed by a spring upstream. The water was clear. He knelt and tasted it. Clean, cold, safe to drink. He walked along the stream bank and found what he hoped to see, a deposit of gray clay exposed where the water had eroded the bank. Clay meant he could make bricks, seal gaps, build a proper hearth. He smiled slightly. The forest around the clearing was mixed hardwood and softwood. He identified oak, pine, and something similar to birch. Good. Different woods for different purposes. Pine for quick fires and resin. Oak for strong construction. Birch bark for waterproofing and kindling. The clearing itself faced south, which meant maximum sun exposure during the day. The north side was protected by a small rise in the land and thick trees. Wind protection. The location was naturally defensible and comfortable. Dae-sung returned to his supplies and picked up the blade. The other students thought 7 days was a long time. For Dae-sung, 7 days was barely enough time to build something proper. He had grown up on a frontier colony world where his grandparents had carved a home from wilderness with less than he had now. They had taught him that every moment mattered, that rest came after work, not before. He selected a young pine tree at the edge of the clearing, about as thick as his wrist. The blade was sharp and well made. He began to cut, working at an angle using proper technique. The tree fell in less than 5 minutes. He trimmed the branches and cut the trunk into manageable sections. The sun touched the horizon. Most students would be setting up their sleeping areas now. Dae-sung dragged the pine logs to his chosen shelter site and began to mark measurements in the dirt with a stick. His hands moved with practiced efficiency. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. Idle hands build nothing. Working hands build worlds. Dae-sung had no intention of simply surviving 7 days. That was the minimum requirement, the baseline. His people did not build to minimum standards. They built to last. They built for comfort. They built because building was what humans did. He began to gather stones from the stream, selecting flat ones for a fire pit. The light was failing, but he worked by feel as much as by sight. He had done this before many times under many conditions. By the time true darkness fell, Dae-sung had cut 6 trees, processed them into logs, gathered 2 piles of stones, and dug the foundation trench for his shelter. He used the fire starter to light a small pile of pine needles and kindling. The fire grew, casting dancing light across his work area. He did not sit down to rest. There was too much to do, and the night was young. Somewhere in the darkness, his classmates were sleeping, confident in their plans for tomorrow. Dae-sung picked up his blade and walked back into the forest to cut more wood. He had a shelter to build, and morning would come quickly. The moon rose full and bright over the wilderness. In various locations across the training grounds, students slept peacefully, wrapped in emergency blankets or curled in hastily made nests. They dreamed of the shelters they would build in the morning. Dae-sung did not sleep. He worked by moonlight and firelight, his movements steady and efficient. His blade flashed as he stripped bark from logs. His hands shaped wood, tied rope, fitted pieces together. The forest around him was alive with night sounds. Insects chirping, small animals moving through underbrush, the constant whisper of wind through leaves. By midnight, he had felled and processed 12 trees. The logs lay in organized piles according to size and purpose. He had learned long ago that organization saved time. Time saved was work accomplished. He began construction of the shelter frame. He had chosen an A-frame design, simple but effective. 2 sturdy oak logs formed the primary supports, driven deep into the ground and braced with stones. Crossbeams connected them, lashed with rope in patterns his grandfather had taught him. The frame grew in the firelight, taking shape like a skeleton. Dae-sung's muscles burned with good effort. Sweat ran down his face despite the cool night air. His hands, already calloused from 2 years of academy training and a lifetime before that on the colony world, worked without pause. Blisters did not form on hands this tough. Fatigue existed somewhere in his body, but he pushed it aside. There would be time to rest when the essential work was finished. He gathered armfuls of long grass and began weaving it into thick mats. His fingers moved in practiced patterns over and under, creating tight weaves that would shed water. The grass was slightly damp with dew, which made it easier to work. These mats would form the outer layer of the roof, thatched properly to keep out rain. The fire pit was complete now, lined with flat stones he had gathered from the stream. The stones would hold heat and radiate it back long after the fire died down. He had built the pit with a slight depression and a raised back edge, which would direct smoke upward and reflect heat toward the shelter. Later he would build a proper chimney, but this would work for now. Around 3 in the morning, Dae-sung finally paused to eat. He had 2 protein bars in his emergency supplies. He ate one slowly, drinking water from the stream. The water was so cold it hurt his teeth, but it was clean and good. While he ate, he studied his work. The shelter frame was solid. The thatched roof mats were ready to be attached. The fire pit was functional. Good progress, but not enough. His mind raced ahead, planning the next steps. He stood up and walked to the stream bank where he had seen the clay deposit. Even in moonlight, he could identify it by texture and smell. He began to dig, using a flat stone as a makeshift shovel. The clay was thick and heavy, gray-blue in the dim light. He carried it back to his site in armfuls, building a pile near the fire. Clay was valuable. Mixed with grass and dried properly, it would become bricks. Pressed into gaps between logs, it would seal out wind and rain. Shaped and fired in heat, it would become pottery for storing water and food. His grandmother had taught him that clay was a gift from the earth, and a wise person did not waste gifts. He mixed clay with torn grass, kneading it with his hands until the consistency was right. Too wet and it would crack as it dried. Too dry and it would not bind properly. His hands knew the feel of good clay the way a musician knows the feel of their instrument. While the clay mixture rested, Dae-sung attached the thatched mats to the shelter frame. He worked from bottom to top, overlapping each layer so water would run down and off, never seeping through. The rope held everything secure. By the time he finished, the eastern sky was beginning to lighten with approaching dawn. He stepped back and examined his work. The shelter was not beautiful, but it was solid. The A-frame design would shed rain and snow. The thatched roof was thick enough to insulate. The structure was large enough to sleep in comfortably, with room for supplies and a small living space. But Dae-sung was not finished. As dawn broke properly, painting the world in shades of gold and pink, he began to construct the interior. He cut and placed logs to create a raised sleeping platform, lifting it off the cold ground. He wove more grass mats for padding. He built a simple door frame and attached a woven grass panel that could be tied open or closed. The fire had burned down to coals. Dae-sung fed it carefully, building it back up. He selected certain pieces of wood and placed them in the hottest part of the fire, letting them begin to char. Hardened wood made better tools. Fire-hardened stakes would last longer than raw ones. While wood hardened in the fire, he returned to the stream. He had seen fish during the night, small silver shapes darting through shallow pools. He began to gather stones and arrange them in a V shape in the stream, creating a simple trap. Fish would swim into the wide end and be channeled into the narrow end, where he could catch them easily. The sun rose higher. Dae-sung felt the weight of 24 hours without sleep, but it was a familiar weight. On the colony world, during harvest season or construction season, his family had often worked through the night. The human body could endure. The human will could push through tiredness. He walked the area surrounding his camp, identifying plants. Some he recognized immediately: wild onions, edible roots, berry bushes that would fruit in a few weeks. Others were unfamiliar alien species he had studied in class. He marked the edible ones mentally and physically, placing small stone markers. Then he began to transplant. Using the blade and a flat stone, he carefully dug up young plants and moved them closer to his shelter. He arranged them in rough rows, spacing them properly. A garden. Not because the assignment required it, but because it made sense. If he was going to be here for 7 days, why not have fresh food growing nearby? Why not start something that would continue to produce? He dug a shallow channel from the stream toward his garden area, letting water flow through to irrigate the transplanted crops. The engineering was simple but effective. Water flowed where it was directed, following the path of least resistance. By the time the sun reached its peak, Dae-sung had been working for nearly 20 hours straight. His shelter was complete: solid walls, waterproof roof, raised sleeping platform, and a door. His fire pit had a proper hearth-taking shape. His fish trap was set. His garden was planted and watered. Stakes of hardened wood lay in neat piles, ready to be used for whatever came next. He finally allowed himself to rest. Dae-sung entered his shelter and lay down on the sleeping platform. The grass mats were soft enough and the platform kept him off the cold ground. The shelter was dim and cool, protected from the rising heat of the day. He could hear the stream flowing nearby, the fire crackling gently outside. He closed his eyes and slept the deep sleep of someone who had earned it. 4 hours later, he woke naturally. His body had taken what it needed. He emerged from the shelter into afternoon sunlight, stretched and looked at what he had built. Good. Solid. But there was more to do. Dae-sung added wood to the fire and began to plan the next phase of work. 7 days was actually quite a lot of time if you used it properly. His classmates would be just finishing their basic shelters today, tired and proud. He smiled slightly and reached for his blade. There were trees to cut, clay to shape, and tools to make. The work was never really finished. There was always something to improve, something to build, something to make better. That was the human way. Instructor Velthar sat in the monitoring room, surrounded by holographic displays. Each screen showed a different student's location, from the perspective of small surveillance drones that drifted silently through the wilderness. The second day had begun, and it was time for the first official check-in. Velthar moved from screen to screen, making notes on a data pad. Teaching for 200 cycles meant the instructor had seen thousands of students face this exact test. Patterns were predictable. Students followed their nature and their training. The first screen showed Hyunwoo. The reptilian student had built a respectable nest of woven branches in a sunny spot near rocks that would hold heat. He was currently sleeping, his scaled body soaking up the morning sun. The shelter was adequate. Velthar marked the assessment, satisfactory progress. Next was Aaron. The avian student had chosen a tall tree and constructed a platform among the branches. Woven grass and small branches formed a bowl-shaped nest. Aaron was preening her feathers safe high above any ground threats. The shelter showed creativity and used her natural advantages well. Velthar noted, good use of species abilities. Bak Nam, the insectoid student, had excavated an impressive burrow system. The entrance was camouflaged and thermal imaging showed a complex network of tunnels below ground. Efficient and well hidden. Velthar approved. Excellent instinctive construction. Screen after screen showed similar results. Students had worked hard the previous day and through the night. Their shelters ranged from basic to impressive, but all met the minimum requirements. Most students were now resting, eating, or gathering supplies. This was normal. This was expected. Then Velthar reached Dae-sung's screen. The instructor stopped, leaned closer, checked the timestamp to confirm this was indeed day 2 morning, checked the location markers to confirm this was the correct student. The screen showed a small settlement. A solid A-frame structure with a thatched roof dominated the clearing. Smoke rose from a stone chimney that had not existed yesterday. The shelter had a door, actual walls, and appeared to be significantly larger than required. Near the shelter, organized piles of firewood sat stacked in neat rows, raised off the ground on a wooden rack to keep dry. But that was not all. A garden stretched along one side of the clearing. Rows of transplanted plants, obviously arranged with purpose. A small irrigation channel brought water from the stream. The garden was weeded and organized. By the stream, a fish trap made of stones and sticks sat in the water. Next to it, a small wooden platform extended over the water like a tiny dock. Tools were everywhere, but not scattered carelessly. They were arranged in a work area. Sharpened stakes, stone implements, what looked like primitive hammers made from rocks lashed to wooden handles. Everything had a place. Velthar stood up from the monitoring station. This is impossible. The instructor reviewed the footage from the previous night, watching at increased speed. The human appeared on screen at sunset, carrying his basic supplies. Then he began to move, and he did not stop moving. The time-lapse showed Dae-sung as a blur of constant motion, cutting trees, processing logs, building frames, gathering materials. The human worked through the entire night while the camera timestamp scrolled forward. Hour after hour the human worked. No rest, no sleep. Just steady, efficient work. Around dawn, the human paused briefly to eat and drink. Then he continued. The shelter took shape. The garden was planted. The fish trap was built. Only when the sun was high did the human finally enter his shelter and sleep. 4 hours later, he emerged and resumed working. Velthar had taught thousands of students from hundreds of species. None of them worked like this. None of them could work like this. The instructor sent a priority message to the other faculty members. Monitoring room, immediately. You need to see this. Within minutes, 3 other instructors crowded around the screen showing Dae-sung's location. Instructor Mora, a gelatinous blob species known for efficiency, studied the image carefully. That is 2 days of work, Mora said. Perhaps 3. The human has been there for only 36 hours. Watch this, Velthar said. and played the time-lapse footage of the previous night. The instructors watched in silence. When it finished, Mora rippled with confusion. He did not sleep. For more than 20 hours he did not sleep. And then he slept for only 4 hours, added Instructor Kelvin, an insectoid who prided himself on efficiency. My species is known for tireless work, but we require 8 hours of rest daily. This is gato abnormal. Velthar manipulated the controls, bringing up biological data from the monitoring drone. His vital signs are normal. Heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature, all within acceptable ranges for human baseline. He is not sick. He is not injured. This is simply what he is doing. The instructors continued watching the current feed. Daesung was shaping clay now, forming it into rectangular blocks and setting them in the sun to dry. Bricks. He was making bricks. Why is he making bricks? Mora asked. The assignment is to survive for 7 days, not to build a permanent residence. I do not know, Velthar admitted. I am beginning to realize that I do not understand human behavior as well as I thought. Instructor Kelvin pointed at another section of the screen. Is that pottery? He has made clay pots. Indeed, several rough clay vessels sat near the fire, clearly shaped by hand and partially dried. They were crude but functional. In 36 hours, Velthar said slowly. The human has built a shelter that exceeds requirements, established a food garden, created tools, made pottery, built a fish trap, and organized his living space to a degree I usually see only in permanent settlements. And according to his biological monitors, he still has energy to continue. The instructors looked at each other. Mora spoke what they were all thinking. What are humans? Velthar pulled up information files on human biology. Humans are endurance predators on their original world. They evolved to chase prey over long distances, outlasting faster animals through sheer persistence. They have efficient cooling systems. They can function on minimal sleep for extended periods. They are highly adaptable. Yes, I know the biology, Mora said. But this is not just adaptation. This is obsessive. No, Velthar said quietly, still watching the screen as Daesung worked. I do not think it is obsession. I think this is normal human behavior. We have simply never seen it in this context before. Instructor Kelvin brought up files on the other human students who had attended the academy over the years. Looking at historical records, human students always score well in endurance tests. They consistently underestimate how much they can accomplish in a given time. They often exceed project requirements without being asked. Because this is what they do, Velthar said, understanding dawning. They do not build to minimum requirements. They build to their capability, and their capability is much higher than we assumed. On screen, Daesung finished arranging his bricks and walked to the forest edge. He began marking trees with small cuts, clearly planning which ones to harvest next. He is not trying to show off, Mora observed. He is not working faster because he knows we are watching. He is just working. This is his baseline. Should we be concerned? Kelvin asked. Is he damaging himself? Pushing too hard? Velthar checked the biological monitors again. No, he is well within safe parameters. Tired, yes, but not dangerously so.
He is drinking water regularly.
He ate fish this morning from his trap. He is managing his health appropriately. The instructors continued to watch for several more minutes. Daesung began cutting down a tree, his movements practiced and efficient. When it fell, he started processing it immediately, trimming branches and cutting the trunk into sections. What do you think he will build next? Mora asked. I have no idea, Velthar admitted, but I am very curious to find out. Instructor Kelvin turned away from the screen. I am going to check on my student. Suddenly I feel that everyone else's shelters are inadequate. They are not inadequate, Velthar said. They are normal. It is the human who is abnormal. The instructor paused. Or perhaps humans are normal for humans, and we have been teaching this course based on non-human standards. Mora rippled thoughtfully. That is a concerning thought. How many of our lessons assume that all species work at similar paces? How many assume that students need rest periods and supervision? Many, Velthar admitted. Perhaps we need to revise our understanding. On the screen, Daesung continued to work, unaware that he had become the subject of intense faculty discussion. He was simply doing what made sense to him, building, improving, preparing. The assignment said 7 days, but in the human's mind, 7 days was enough time to build something real. Day 3 arrived with heavy rain. Dark clouds rolled across the wilderness and water fell in steady sheets. In various locations, students huddled in their shelters, waiting for the storm to pass. Hyunwoo discovered that his branch nest was not as waterproof as he had hoped. Rain dripped through gaps in the weaving and his scales grew cold. He was miserable but determined to endure. This was part of the test after all. Erin's tree platform swayed in the wind. Rain soaked through her feathered shelter, and she pressed herself against the tree trunk trying to stay warm. She had not anticipated how cold rain could be. Baknam's underground burrow was dry, but water began to seep through the entrance. The insectoid student spent hours digging drainage channels to redirect the flow. It was exhausting work, but necessary. 20 kilometers away, Dae-sung stood in his shelter, completely dry. Rain drummed on the thatched roof but did not penetrate. The overlap pattern he had used worked perfectly, shedding water away from the structure. His chimney drew properly, pulling smoke up and out while keeping rain from coming down. The fire crackled warm and bright in the hearth. He sat on his sleeping platform working on a project. Using his blade and patience, he was carving wooden pins and notches. Later, he would use these to build furniture without wasting rope on non-essential items. Rope was valuable. Wood was plentiful. Outside, his garden received the rain gratefully. The irrigation channel he had dug now served as drainage, preventing flooding. The plants he had transplanted 3 days ago were already adjusting to their new location, their leaves turning toward where the sun would be when the clouds cleared. The fish trap was filling with fish. They swam into the enclosed area seeking shelter from the current, not realizing they were trapped. Dae-sung would have plenty to eat tonight. He had already eaten breakfast. Roasted fish seasoned with wild herbs he had identified and gathered. The clay pot he had made and fired in the hearth held clean water. Another pot contained edible roots he had dug up and boiled. His grandmother would have approved. When the rain finally lightened to a drizzle, Dae-sung emerged from his shelter. He wore a cape he had woven from layers of bark and grass, keeping him relatively dry. He checked his garden, ensuring the plants had not been damaged by the heavy rain. Everything looked healthy. He walked to the work area he had established and uncovered tools he had protected with bark sheets. Today he planned to build a smokehouse. The fish trap was producing more than he could eat fresh, and smoking would preserve the surplus for later. Waste was unacceptable. By day 4, the other students were struggling. Hyunwoo's shelter had partially collapsed during the rain. He spent the entire day rebuilding, tired and frustrated. His food supplies were running low because he had underestimated how much energy he would need. Erin had successfully hunted twice, but flying in the rain had exhausted her. She was hungry and tired, and her feathers were still damp. The cold made her sluggish. Baknam's burrow had flooded completely. The insectoid had barely escaped and was now trying to dig a new shelter in different soil. It was desperate work, and Baknam was falling behind schedule. Several students were in similar situations. The wilderness was testing them in ways they had not anticipated. The assignment that had seemed straightforward was proving to be genuinely difficult. Dae-sung, meanwhile, was expanding his settlement. The smokehouse was complete, a small structure made from green wood that would not catch fire easily, with racks inside for hanging fish. A small fire pit at the bottom produced smoke from damp wood and leaves, filling the chamber and curing the fish. It was simple technology, but effective. He had also built a second, smaller shelter for storage. His pottery had expanded to include larger vessels for storing water and preserving food. He had discovered wild grains growing near the stream and had harvested some, storing them in a clay jar sealed with pine resin. The fence around his garden was now complete. Sharpened stakes driven into the ground and lashed together, keeping out any small animals that might eat his crops. The garden itself was thriving, with several plants already showing new growth. Dae-sung had also begun a project his grandfather would have recognized immediately, a map. Using a flat piece of bark and charcoal from the fire, he was marking the area around his camp. The stream and its course, the types of trees in different areas, locations where he had found useful plants, places where clay deposits existed, hills and valleys. A map meant understanding. Understanding meant efficiency. Efficiency meant survival. On day 5, the Academy allowed brief communication checks. Students could send short messages to confirm they were safe. It was not required, but most students used the opportunity to request encouragement or advice. Hyunwoo sent a message. Shelter rebuilt. Food situation difficult. Morale low but surviving. Aaron sent. Hunting requires more energy than anticipated. Weather has been challenging. Will persevere. Boknam sent. New burrow established. Lost supplies in flood. Managing with reduced resources. When it was Dae-sung's turn, he hesitated. He was not sure what to report. Everything was going well. Better than well, actually. He settled on simple truth. Shelter secure, food supplies adequate, no problems to report. In the monitoring room, Velthar read Dae-sung's message and then looked at the current surveillance feed. Adequate was a significant understatement. The human settlement now included multiple structures, a thriving garden, organized storage areas, and what appeared to be a drying rack for animal hides. Wait, animal hides? Velthar zoomed in. Yes, definitely hides. Dae-sung had apparently trapped several small animals, processed them for meat, and was now tanning their hides. For what purpose, Velthar could only guess. Possibly bags for carrying supplies, possibly clothing, possibly just because the opportunity existed and the human saw no reason to waste it. The other instructors had been checking the feed regularly now. Dae-sung's settlement had become something of a fascination among the faculty. Word had spread, and instructors who were not even teaching this course were stopping by the monitoring room to watch the human work. He is making rope now, Instructor Mora observed on day 6. From plant fibers. Why does he need more rope? We gave him rope. He used the standard rope for essential construction, Velthar explained, having watched enough footage to understand Dae-sung's logic. Now he wants rope for non-essential projects but does not want to waste standard materials, so he makes his own. That is, surprisingly thoughtful, Mora admitted. Humans think in terms of resource management, Velthar said, but not in the way we teach it. We teach, use resources efficiently to survive the required time. Humans think, use resources efficiently to build maximum capability for unlimited time. On day 6, Hyunwoo, frustrated and exhausted, used his communication time to contact Dae-sung. Human, how are you managing? This assignment is harder than I expected. Dae-sung, who was currently weaving a basket, paused his work. Managing what specifically? Are you injured? No, not injured. Just tired, hungry. The shelter keeps needing repairs. How is your shelter holding up? It is fine. No problems. Dae-sung considered. Are you having trouble finding food? Yes. I have been hunting, but it uses much energy. Have you tried trapping? It uses less energy. Set traps in the evening, check them in the morning. There was a long pause. I did not think of that. That is clever. It is basic technique, Dae-sung said, genuinely confused why this was not obvious. Also, have you identified edible plants in your area? Fish in streams? Both are easier than hunting. Another pause. I have been focused on hunting because that is what my species does naturally. Natural methods are good, Dae-sung said, but if they are not working, try different methods. Adaptation is survival. After the communication ended, Hyunwoo sat in his partially repaired shelter and thought about the human's words. Adaptation is survival. His people were proud hunters, yes, but pride did not fill an empty stomach. Maybe there was wisdom in the human's approach. That evening, Hyunwoo built his first trap. In the monitoring room, Velthar noted the interaction with approval. The human is teaching without being asked to teach, sharing knowledge naturally. Because he does not see it as competition, Mora observed. He sees it as problem-solving. If another student has a problem, the solution is obvious to him, so he shares it. Humans are social creatures, Velthar said. Highly competitive, yes, but also highly cooperative. It is an interesting contradiction. On screen, Dae-sung had finished his basket and was now using it to gather berries from bushes he had found a kilometer from camp. His map had led him to the berry patch efficiently, saving time and energy. Tomorrow was day 7, the final day. Then day 8 would bring pickup and the end of the assignment. Velthar wondered what Dae-sung would build tonight, because the human would certainly build something. The human was always building. Dawn of day 8 arrived cold and clear. The transport shuttle lifted from the academy landing pad, carrying Instructor Velthar and several other faculty members who had requested to join the pickup. Word had spread about the human student settlement and everyone wanted to see it in person. "We will collect students in order of their drop locations," Velthar announced. Standard procedure. The first pickup was Boknam. The insectoid student emerged from a functional but modest burrow, looking exhausted but proud. Boknam carried a small bag of salvage supplies and climbed aboard the shuttle with relief, evident in every movement. "How was your experience?" Velthar asked. "Challenging but educational," Boknam said. "The flood on day 4 tested my adaptation skills. I believe I demonstrated adequate survival capability." "You did well," Velthar assured the student. "Rest now." The next pickup was Erin. The avian student's tree platform had survived the weather and she glided down to meet the shuttle with practiced grace. Her feathers looked ragged and she was clearly tired, but there was pride in her bearing. 7 days in the wilderness," she said as she boarded. "My ancestors would approve. It was difficult, but I endured." More pickups followed. Each student showed signs of their week in the wilderness. Tired, dirty, hungry, but satisfied with their survival. Their shelters ranged from basic to impressive, all meeting the minimum requirements. Some had exceeded expectations. All had learned valuable lessons. Hyunwoo was collected from a location near a rocky hillside. His shelter was crude but functional, patched and repaired multiple times. But the reptilian student carried himself differently than he had at the beginning. There was less arrogance, more thoughtfulness. "I learned much," Hyunwoo said as he settled into a shuttle seat. "About survival, yes, but also about different approaches to problems. I even successfully trapped food like Dae-sung suggested." Velthar noted this with interest. "The human shared techniques with you?" "Yes, he did not have to, but he did. I was wrong about humans. I called them fragile and questioned their survival ability. I would like to apologize to him when we pick him up." "That is growth," Velthar said approvingly. "You will have the opportunity soon." Finally, only one student remained. Dae-sung. The shuttle flew toward his location. Through the windows, students and instructors watched the wilderness pass below. Then someone pointed ahead. "Is that smoke?" A thin column of smoke rose from the forest canopy, marking Dae-sung's location. But as the shuttle descended, more details became visible. Students pressed against windows, staring. "That cannot be right," Arin said. "That looks like a village." The pilot, a professional who had flown pickup missions for 10 years, spoke over the intercom. "Instructor Velthar, I am at the correct coordinates, but I am seeing what appears to be a small settlement. Should I verify the location?" "The location is correct," Velthar said. "Land in the clearing." As the shuttle descended, the full scope of Dae-sung's camp became visible. The main shelter was substantially larger than minimum requirements, with a proper thatched roof, stone chimney, and solid walls. Smoke rose from the chimney, suggesting a fire inside. But the shelter was just the beginning. A second, smaller structure stood nearby, clearly a storage building. A third structure, open on one side, was recognizable as a smokehouse with racks of drying fish visible inside. A wooden fence enclosed a garden where plants grew in organized rows, connected to the stream by an irrigation channel. A stone-lined path led from the shelter to the stream, where a small wooden platform extended over the water. Tools hung from racks. Firewood was stacked in neat, dry piles. Clay pots sat arranged by size near a work area. Animal hides stretched on frames. A partially completed basket lay on a bench made from split logs. The shuttle landed and the door opened. Students filed out slowly, staring at the settlement in disbelief. Dae-sung emerged from the main shelter carrying a clay pot. He saw the shuttle and set down the pot, walking toward the group. He looked tired but healthy, wearing clothes he had repaired with hide patches and fiber cordage. His hands were dirty from morning work. "Good morning, instructor," he said. "I am ready for pickup." Hyunwoo stepped forward, his competitive nature struggling with what he was seeing. You cheated. You must have had help. This is not possible. Daesung looked confused. Cheated? No, I followed the assignment requirements. Build adequate shelter and survive 7 days. This is not adequate, Aaron exclaimed, gesturing at the settlement. This is a homestead. This is a permanent residence. The assignment specified minimum requirements, Daesung said carefully. It did not specify a maximum standard. I built what made sense with available materials and time. Boknam walked to the garden, examining the plants. These are thriving. You transplanted and established a food garden. Why? Because food was available and gardening is more efficient than constant foraging, Daesung explained. It seemed logical. Velthar stepped forward, surveying the settlement with experienced eyes. Everything was well constructed, functional, and thoughtfully designed. This was not the work of someone showing off. This was the work of someone solving problems in the most complete way possible. Daesung, the instructor said. May I see inside your shelter? Of course, instructor. Velthar ducked through the doorway, followed by other faculty members. Inside, the shelter was organized and comfortable. A raised sleeping platform with grass mat padding. A proper hearth with stones arranged to radiate heat. Shelves built into the walls holding clay pots, food supplies, and tools. A work area with a small bench. The floor was covered with woven mats. Light came through gaps in the walls that could be covered or opened as needed. It was better than some permanent residences Velthar had seen. The instructor emerged and addressed the assembled students. I want all of you to watch something. Velthar activated a portable holo display and showed footage from the first night. The students watched in silence as Daesung worked through the darkness. Hour after hour of constant motion, building, gathering, processing materials. The timestamp scrolled forward relentlessly. He did not sleep, Boknam whispered. For more than 20 hours he just worked. The footage continued through the following days. Daesung building, improving, expanding. Brief periods of rest, then more work. Efficient, methodical, never wasting motion or materials. When the footage ended, Hyunwoo turned to Daesung. I apologize. You did not cheat. You just worked. Constantly. How is that possible? Daesung shrugged slightly. My people have a saying, idle hands build nothing. I had time and materials. Why not use them well? But this is beyond the assignment, Aaron said. You were only required to survive, not to build all of this. I do not understand the distinction, Daesung said honestly. Surviving is building. Building is surviving. They are the same thing. Velthar understood now. For humans, there was no minimum survival. There was only maximum capability within available resources. They did not build to requirements. They built to potential. Daesung, Velthar said, you have achieved the highest score in this academy's history. Not because you did more than required, but because you demonstrated the true meaning of survival. Not just enduring, but thriving. Thank you, instructor. But I only did what made sense. Instructor Mora approached the garden, studying it closely. These plants will continue to grow. This settlement will persist long after you leave. You have created something permanent. Yes, Daesung said. That bothered me at first. Leaving feels wasteful. But perhaps another student can use it in the future. Hyunwoo stepped closer to Daesung. You helped me when I struggled. You shared knowledge without being asked. Thank you. I was arrogant at the beginning and I was wrong about your species. You were not wrong, Daesung said. Humans are fragile in many ways. We have no scales, no wings, no natural weapons. But we have hands that build and minds that adapt. Those are enough. Velthar let the students explore the settlement for several minutes, understanding that this was an important learning moment. They needed to see what was possible, to understand that different species approach survival differently. Finally, the instructor called them back to the shuttle. We must return to the academy. Daesung, you may bring personal items if you wish. Daesung gathered his handmade tools, wrapping them carefully. He took one of his clay pots, the best one he had made. He looked around the settlement once more, mentally cataloging everything he would remember. As they boarded the shuttle, Boknam asked, Do you regret leaving it behind? No, Daesung said. I regret nothing. I used the time well. That is enough. The shuttle lifted and the students watched through the windows as the settlement grew smaller below them. The smoke from the chimney still rose into the clear sky. The garden would continue growing. The structures would stand through seasons. In the monitoring room later, After students had been dismissed and reports filed, Velthar made a final note in the academic records. Human baseline survival response documented. Recommend preservation of site for educational purposes. Future instructors should be aware that human students may exceed expectations not through competition, but through nature. The note was flagged for special attention and filed in permanent archives.